What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American, here today to react and learn about different Norwegian accents and dialects, and how different Norwegians from the different parts of Norway can sound differently from each other. I can kind of relate to this because here in the United States, depending on where you are, in America, people can sound a lot different from each other and even talk differently. And apparently, this is very, very true for Norway. So today, I specifically want to learn about the North, the East, and West regions of Norway and how they have differences, how they speak and how they sound, and different dialects and stuff like that. So I'm excited because today we have this video of an American who has lived in Norway and lived in these different regions, and he is going to point out and highlight some of the biggest differences he noticed between Norwegians who live in different regions around Norway. So this sounds like it's going to be very, very interesting, and honestly, very, very specific, something I've never really gotten to dive deep into before. So I'm very interested about this. Let's take a look.
And I generally split up Norway as the West, North, and East.
Okay.
All over TV and radio, they speak Eastern Norwegian.
Oh.
And to describe Eastern Norwegian...
Oh. I didn't even realize it was like that. Like there was a TV and radio version of Norwegian language. And apparently that's known as Eastern Norwegian. So the way that people speak in Eastern Norway, that's how most people speak on television? Why? Why is that, actually? That's really interesting.
They speak Eastern Norwegian. And to describe Eastern Norwegian, it sounds very sing-songy, very light.
Okay. Sing-songy. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it sounds very nice, very light. So, does that mean there's Norwegian that sounds very dark and harsh, and there's Norwegian that sounds very sing-songy and light? Maybe he can give an example of this? I'm not even sure what that means.
If you've ever heard the Swedish Chef from the Muppets and how he goes do 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 do, it's a little bit like that.
I think I know what he means. This is from like the Muppets or a children's show. I thought that was a stereotype or something, like an exaggeration, like hello, how are you doing? Like I didn't. I thought that was like a stereotypical Scandinavian accent or something. Is that the sing-songy? Like, hello, how are you doing? Like, is that a real thing? Is that real? And that's kind of like Eastern Norwegian sounding? Is this right?
I generally tried to hold an Eastern dialect because since it's on TV and radio, everyone could understand me if I spoke that dialect.
All right. So Eastern Norwegian dialect is like the most common and the easiest to understand, the most understood in Norway. Is that accurate? Wow. Yeah, this is very different to America. Like in America, no matter where you go in the United States, everyone can understand you. It's all English. Like, it's all understandable, I think, anyway. And this makes it sound like the different regions of Norway are a bit more different. They have a bit more differences than I'm used to, like here in America. Wow.
In the West, they have different words for things than, compared to the East. However, their pronunciation is the most difficult part. And so they take their R's and they scar them. Meaning, if you think of a German R, they have it back in their throat. They do that with all of their R's in the West.
This is Western Norway. Western Norwegians pronounce their R's differently. R. How did he do that?
Back in their throat. Think of a German R. They have it.
Ugh. like you're coughing, like you're gonna cough up some phlegm or spit or the. I can't even do it. I can't even do it. But wow, see, that's the kind of thing I would never, ever, ever know unless I found something like this on YouTube or something. Western Norwegian dialect. You pronounce the R's different. Wow.
They have it back in their throat. They do that with all of their R's in the West.
Okay.
And that can be very difficult for some missionaries who have been taught by MTC teachers that are speaking Eastern dialect.
Oh my gosh. I'm guessing Norwegians are perfectly capable of understanding each other, the different kind of dialects and accents around Norway. But I feel like if you're a foreigner learning Norwegian, if you learn Eastern Norwegian dialect, it would be very, very hard to understand a Western Norwegian dialect if they're literally pronouncing letters completely differently, like R's and stuff. Wow. It takes a lot of. It's kind of sounds kind of tough to understand all the different kinds of Norwegian language. Honestly, that's amazing.
So that's something to get used to.
Yeah.
Northern dialect has a special place in my heart.
Okay.
I served both winters up in the north, which was a difficult experience, but I have such warm feelings towards it.
He has special feelings towards northern Norway. I wonder why. Doesn't it get very, very, very cold and dark in northern Norway? That's got to be quite an experience for an American to go through, honestly. But he seemed to have enjoyed it.
Northerners generally speak more slowly,
Oh.
and
Okay. That's actually sounds really good, especially for an American who, if an American was learning Norwegian, being in northern Norway where people speak slower, that would actually be very helpful, probably for learning. Actually.
more comfortably, it seems. But also, it's more nasal. It's more forward in the nose. Like, for example, one of our favorite phrases from the north is "I kjem fra Buda," which means "I come from Buddha," but it's a very nasally, somewhat Asian sounding.
Nasally, hello. Like, how are you? Like, I don't even know if I'm doing it right. Nasally. That's so fascinating how different Norwegians, like who all live in Norway, the same country, can sound so different. That is so cool. That is such a cool thing about language. And I don't know, the way he described Northern Norwegian dialect is like people talk slower, a little more comforting. Maybe people are just more laid back in Northern Norway because it's so cold. Everyone's just like, I'm just going to relax and take my time. I don't know why that is.
Dialect. Yeah, that's the north. Okay, so this is probably going to sound terrible.
So there are some pretty interesting differences between Western, Eastern, and Northern Norwegian language. What about Southern Norway? There has to be some unique things about Southern Norway. I wonder what that's like.
Because I know. Yeah, that's the north. Okay, so this is probably going to sound terrible because I know that all my Norwegian friends are going to be listening to this.
Okay.
And yeah, they're going to think that was a terrible Western dialect. I'll say, yeah, you're right. Okay, so I will say I come from Bergen in Norwegian in the three dialects. Okay. So,
wow, so you can say the same sentence 3 different ways, depending on where you are in Norway. That's just cool to think about.
So, in the Eastern dialect, I would say, Jeg kommer fra Bergen, which would be a total lie, because if you're from Bergen, you're very proud of your dialect. If you're actually from Bergen, you'd say, Jeg kommer fra Bergen.
That sounded totally different. That sounded like you needed to learn a completely different language. I mean, I don't understand Norwegian. Maybe it's a lot more similar than I think. But those two sentences sounded pretty different to me. Different tone and different words, right? There were some different words. The second one was a lot shorter.
I'll say that again, just in case. Jeg kommer fra Bergen.
Okay.
And then in the north, you would say, Jeg kom fra Bergen.
Okay, a little slower.
Jeg kom fra Bergen. That's close enough.
What was the first one, though?
Eastern dialect, I would say, Jeg kommer fra Bergen.
That was a little longer. Like it sounded maybe a bit more formal and a little more the most clear. Is that why Eastern Norwegian is kind of used the most on TV and radio? It is very clear. There was more words, I think.
I'll say that again, just in case. In the north, you would say, Jeg kom fra Bergen. Jeg kom fra Bergen.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very pleasant. Like he said, Northern Norwegian is very slow and pleasant. I like it.
That's close enough. Yeah. North dialect, they chop their words in half, it seems. It's a little lazier, for example.
What?
Like if I were to say, Jeg kommer fra, which means I come from, that is the Eastern dialect. But in Northern dialect, they would just say, Jeg kom fra, instead of Jeg kommer fra.
Yes. I noticed that. Okay, good. I was like, am I imagining things here? Because clearly the Eastern dialect has more to it. And the Northern dialect removed some of the words. It's a little more, not like slang, but like shortened words. So, do you have to know all of the Eastern dialect, like all of Norwegian? Then probably you can understand Northern and Western Norwegian, which seem to shorten words and remove things. But you kind of need to know normal Norwegian first, right? What is even considered normal Norwegian, right? There's no normal, but there seems to be a most commonly used and understood, which is Eastern, I think.
And there was a really old man in northern Norway that he would talk about. He had a very thick fisherman's dialect.
Huh.
Sweetest man in the world. He was so nice. But he would talk about, ja, det var vinteren i 99, og vi hadde, det var 27 grader, og vi hadde 7 meter snø. He would just talk about how cold it was and the snow and the terrible fish prices.
Okay. I don't know what the moral of the story is. Like, if you can understand a northern Norwegian fisherman, then you're pretty much good. You can probably understand Norwegian pretty well.
I love talking to that old man. Anyway, yeah, there's some.
Wow, that was fascinating. I loved hearing about his perspective on that. This was by Lifey, and I got to give that a like. That was great. I had no idea that there were such distinct differences between North, East, and Western Norway. I knew Norway had different dialects for different regions, but this really clarified it a lot more to me and divided it up in a way I can understand. I'm very curious what happened to Southern Norway. He didn't talk about Southern Norway. I'm sure they have a dialect as well. And there's probably Norwegian dialects like within Eastern, Northern, and Western Norway. That even in smaller regions within those bigger regions, right? Stuff like that, different accents and dialects. And this was just a super cool kind of way for me to understand. And the fact that he gave examples of what different Norwegians sound like and what those differences actually sound like and are, that was very helpful. I'd never heard that. I've never heard it put in front of me like that plainly. So that was actually really helpful and enjoyable. So I feel like I learned a lot more about Norwegian language and how it spread across the country of Norway and some of the differences. And I'm sure there's a lot more nuance to it than I understand. But this was great as just a sort of an introduction to getting to know the differences. So I enjoyed this quite a bit. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment, perhaps with what you think about Norwegian accents and dialects and how they are spread across Norway and the differences. That'd be fun to hear about. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Norway and Norwegian culture, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.